Welcome to EWA's FIN-LYT podcast. EWA is a fee-only RIA based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We hope all listeners of this podcast will benefit as we deep dive into complex financial topics that we will make simplified for you. And we hope that this really serves as a catalyst so that you can make the best financial planning decisions for your family and also save time. Welcome, everybody. This week on FIN-LYT by EWA, welcoming good friend and client John Izzo. John is a CEO of Class 101 in Pittsburgh and runs an amazing business that essentially helps high school graduates, A all the way through Z, as far as applying for schools, getting the best SAT scores, to getting as much money, free money as possible, to making smart decisions. So exploration all the way to the finish line of getting into school and starting off with a strong start. So John, welcome.
Matt, thanks for having me.
Did I miss anything as far as what you do?
No, you covered most of it. Honestly, what we do is focus on students grades 9 through 12, usually more so 10th, 11th, sometimes 12th graders. We are in the business of helping kids explore from a career standpoint, explore what are the schools and all the colleges and universities that are going to be the best fit for them, whether it's environmentally, financially, academically, and then supporting them as they go through the vetting process, building their applications, test scores, because, college sometimes is a very black and white game, and GPA, SAT scores not only lead to acceptance, but then also scholarship money on the back end, and then supporting them and their parents as they're going through the financial aid process, and then eventually until they make that decision to launch.
Awesome. Well, I feel like, and I remember, to date myself, 2006, going to college, it was just very random, like very influenced by adult figures in my life, parents, go to a religious, go here, study this. So I had no clue what I was doing. I feel like I got extremely lucky. I fell into a lot of things I would, now I feel like I'm in a position where I'm meant to do it, but it was just like a string of like random chance and luck and hard work, obviously. But looking back, I would have loved to have like someone tell me, hey, here's what you do. So like, let's just, for the audience of our podcast, and a lot of high net worth, high income earners, a lot of them are going to be planning for college or have kids going through this process. So let's just narrow this down to like, what are some, from all your experience, how many kids have you helped get into college at this point? Do you have statistics?
I do. So we launched October 2017. Over the 6.5 years that we've supported students, we've, I believe, had 550 graduates. And usually we have
high school graduates.
Okay. Yes. Usually we hold a caseload of anywhere between 90 to 160 students, depending on how large our senior class is.
And you got a team, right?
I have a team. Yeah. I have a team, yes. So I am full-time owner, operator, college planner. I have one full-time college planner who is amazing. Honestly, I got so lucky finding her. And then I have a part-time essay writer who helps all the kids do their revisions after essays are written. And then I just recently hired on a part-time SAT prep instructor.
Awesome. So 550. So you obviously have a lot of perspective. So I want to just extract as much wisdom as we can from you. So out of this, what commonalities have you found? Like if you were to, if someone wasn't your client, you were just to give them like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 tips of like, hey, 80-20 analysis. I'm a huge believer in this. Like if you folks, what's the 20% of stuff that a junior or senior in high school could do that will make up 80% of the success they're going to have at the next level to prepare for that?
You touched on it, kind of, dating yourself, going back to 2006. It is such a different game now. And, 20 years ago, 18 years ago, whatever the number is, it was a much simpler process. You can apply to a college mid-senior year. You can take your SATs end of senior year. And in most cases, you're still fine. Now it is so much more competitive. The students are smarter. They're more driven. These colleges are getting insanely difficult to get into. So one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give is for parents and for students, rising throughout high school, do your research. You want to see what are the average statistics. So I am personally not a huge fan of an acceptance rate. And that's what everybody tends to go off of when they're looking at what is the competitiveness of a school. And the reason I say that is because they're very black and white numbers. It's going to show that University of Tennessee has a 68% acceptance rate. So strong, but doable. Mm-hmm. And those numbers are not giving you what actually happens. So they're showing that, okay, if 1,000 kids apply, 680 get in. But we don't know anything about those 680 students. So schools now are starting to promote what's called a freshman profile. And it's going to show you, based on the students we most recently accepted, here is their average GPA. Here is their average SAT score. So then, as a parent and as a student, you can say, okay, their average GPA is a 4.3. I have a 3.7. Their average SAT score is 1320. I have an 1100. Where do you fall within that window to be able to feel confident or comfortable with the idea of this is that target school that everybody talks about, or what is a reach, or what is a safety?
So that 68%, are you saying people basically have a cheat sheet of like people that know they're not going to be accepted, like already know, so they're not even going to apply? Is that essentially?
If you do your research.
Okay.
So that's what we do. So I would never be the one to tell a kid, this is not going to work out for you. But I want you to have all the information
to educate them
to make an informed decision, because I don't want you to fall in love with a Range Rover when you can only afford a Honda. There's no point. So the numbers are the numbers.
Gotcha. That's mind blowing. I remember, just a quick story. We'll try to, as humbly as possible. I got accepted, I think, into most colleges I applied for. But I remember Case Western was like the best one. I was excited, and they offered me a decent amount of money, and just for like religious reasons, like they played basketball on Sundays. So my parents were against that, but like that. So I ended up going to Geneva, super religious school. But I remember I was adamantly against going to Geneva, and so I wrote the essay in like 30 seconds, and I was like, I want to like sabotage my chances of getting accepted here, and they like immediately accepted and basically gave me almost a full ride. But it's funny. A totally different game back then than it was
so
today.
Different.
But
I wrote my college essay in my home ec class on paper with a pencil in March before I graduated. And back then it was common.
I don't think I could survive today's competitive environment.
Now and that's, again, these are just tidbits. So much of it is educating yourself on how competitive these kids are now and how much these schools cost. So that is the one thing that, I've seen when we are working with new clients, educating the parents on how much do these schools actually cost. So making them aware of how difficult these schools are to get into now, but then what are the price points? Because so many parents still have that mindset of, it's 1987, you can mow lawns all summer to pay for fall tuition. Those days are long gone. Our in-state...
That's literally what my brother did.
Yeah. Our in-state public schools, Pitt and Penn State, for example, since we live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's in-state tuition is very high compared to other states. So for a student in Pittsburgh who wants to go to Pitt and live on campus, they're paying anywhere between $37,000 and $41,000 a year.
All in, like tuition, room and board.
Tuition fees, room and board.
Before any scholarships or anything.
Before any scholarships.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. Now, when you start looking out of state and you're getting into the out-of-state public schools, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, we're at 50, 60 grand easy. And the problem is, and this is, again, where the research comes into play, you want to try to identify, if the finances are important, who gives money and who does not. Because sometimes schools are not as transparent as others, and trying to identify, okay, is this 60 a true 60?
Maybe it's a 30 if you know what you're doing.
Or is this 60 a 30 with the right student, right stats at the right school?
Gotcha. Okay, so tip number one, just to summarize, it's like do a ton of research or team up with you who has all this knowledge so you can laser focus on what actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah, research is key.
Research is key. Okay. So what would be tip number 2? I'm a senior and, starting to work with you. How am I putting myself in the position for the best possible success?
Tip number 2, and I've alluded to it, the competitiveness of these schools, really having the hard conversation with your students and as a family, identifying what is the most important thing as we gear up for post-secondary education. And, I personally ask this to all of my students I work with, and, it's a great conversation to have for anyone. Sit down as a family and discuss what are the priorities for going to college. I try to lump them into, okay, so when you're choosing a school, you really want to try to think big picture. When you're selecting your school, and hopefully prior to this point, you have explored careers, explored majors, pathways, because I think that is one of the most important factors in deciding what are the types of schools that you're pursuing.
Wow. So just maybe a little bit of a side tangent here. I just remember when I was in senior year of high school, I was basically just focused on, sports and getting as high of a grade as possible. I had no inkling of thinking about the next stage of careers or major or anything like that. So how do you guide a senior in high school towards starting to think about like putting on the big boy pants? Yeah. Like, cause I didn't have any of that guidance. I didn't seek it, but it wasn't proactively given to me.
It's, I don't want to say it's difficult, but I try to be subtle with it because we want to identify, what is the pathway? Also understanding that kids change their mind constantly and nobody has that crystal ball. What I try to, at the very least, do is identify a field, whether we're using the DISC assessment, the John Holland SDS code. ONET actually has a really...
So wait, you're doing the actual, like the DISC assessment is something we did as like a firm, which was super helpful. It speaks to the culture, personalities,
Correct.
How everyone interacts. So you're doing that for a high school kid?
We are doing it for the high school kid.
That's crazy.
So
I imagine that probably eliminates like 90% of things that probably aren't a good fit, narrows it down at least.
It does narrow it down. We actually just started implementing this past year because we've used other resources in the past, but this is the one that we're kind of targeting now because in addition to, the careers and things that it spits out, it really gives you that personality of a student and, what is their leadership style? What is their communication style? And the reason I think that's so important is, and if you can identify a field, whether it's STEM, medicine, business, you don't have to get into the nitty gritty of, I want to do finance or I want to do HR. Business is business initially. Mm-hmm. You're going into a business school or you're going into a college of arts and sciences. That should, in my opinion, dictate what are the schools you're looking at because, and we've talked about this before, doing that research from a salary standpoint, but then also from a pathway standpoint. And this is by no means disrespecting anybody, within the social sciences or within education, but those ceilings are usually on the lower end. So in my opinion, if you were going to be financially responsible, you are going to probably target schools that are going to be cheaper for these students not to be in an absurd amount of debt that they'll never be able to dig themselves out of.
I was just looking at stats. So like average, this is on educationdata.org, average student loan debt, this is 2021, over 37,000, federal, 54,000, private, out of 45 million plus borrowers that have student loan debt, 92% of them have federal debt, which obviously, we know the interest rates on that. But what's staggering to me is 20 years after school, half of those people still have more than half of their debt. So you talk about being strapped
for a long time.
I think the education around, and we have these different figures like your income, household income's 200 or 250. You shouldn't have a house over 500,000. It's 2x, or it's 30% of your net take home. And this isn't like a bank's going to give you twice that, but if you want to have a financial plan in place, you don't feel house poor, and you're able to fund your kids' college and retire, it's just simple math. So talking about school loan debt, I always give advice because I've stress tested this. I've seen so many people you graduate, forecast your income 3 years out. If you're a social worker, maybe that's 50. If you're a CPA pursuing your CPA, maybe that's 100. If you're a doctor, maybe that's 300. You shouldn't come out of school with more than one times that amount of school debt. So if you're a social worker, you should be aiming for no more than 50. If you're a doctor, you should be aiming no more than 300 if you're a primary care, or 500 if you're a surgeon, which I know can be tough, but do you agree with those figures? Are those figures doable? Because a lot of people look at me like, what? That's impossible.
I personally think whatever data you pulled up, and now I know it's credible data and it's nationwide data, but again,
that includes a ton of kids that are getting fully paid for, obviously. So it skews it. So what do you actually see out there?
All right. So just to paint a picture. So again, where we live, our the cheapest in-state schools that a student can go to in Pennsylvania, outside of doing a community college route. For starters, Slippery Rock, IUP, Cal U, they cost for, let's say, sticker price, tuition fees, room and board, about $22,000 a year. So our cheapest option is just shy of $90,000
for 4 years.
For 4 years. Now they will give money, financial aid, depending on, that's a whole other issue with, how.
If you want to take a couple of victory laps, you're way over six figures.
You're way over six figures.
It's crazy.
So for the families that, are fortunate enough to be able to help their students out, by all means. But what I would say is, even though if you have the money, doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend it.
Right.
Because if you're doing your research and you are identifying, okay, this is a school that we like, and then this is where I think one of my biggest values comes in, not only making it less stressful for the families, but identifying, okay, you like school A. They cost $40,000 a year. Competitive to get into, competitive usually leads to no scholarships. Penn State.
Because they don't have to.
Penn State.
They're going to get their whatever
They're
their
going to
number
get
is.
their
No
100,000 applicants, and people are dying to pay full boat for it. So they give very little.
Why though? Because they can't even they can't even get into the CFP. I'm just kidding. But now that they're expanding the 12 teams, is that this year?
I think it is this year.
I'm joking, but joking aside, how many kids decide based upon two factors: history of sports in their family or just parental influence?
80% at least
are based upon those factors.
I would say 80%.
I went to Alabama. You're going to Alabama.
80% are targeting, I want the big football tailgate. I want the sorority life. I want that experience.
It's an expensive party. I mean,
it's going to be a hell of a 4 years.
Pay for your kid's car and they can drive there from.
It'll be a heck of a 4 years.
Yeah.
But that's honestly what so many kids are chasing now. And, I get it. It's amazing. But make it make sense. Because there's schools like Penn State where if you're not overly concerned about reputation, the kid who gets into Penn State could probably go to a Ohio University that has a similar feel for 22 with strong stats. So 37 versus 22.
Gotcha.
That's,
So out of the 550 kids that you've guided to post-grad education, post-high school, and is that mostly 4 year, or do you also do trade schools and other?
Vast majority 4 year.
Okay.
And I come from a counseling background, so even though my business is, I would say, fully based around helping kids
4 year
go
bachelor's,
to college,
yeah,
I will be the first to tell you, not everybody needs to go to college.
Yeah.
I've had some that, went through the process, they've explored and ended up going to Air Force or ended up enlisting in the Navy or going and doing some sort of apprenticeship program.
So, I mean, those people probably got the biggest value from you, even though they didn't get what just the guidance to say, hey, you're avoiding $100,000 trap that it's not meant for you was probably the biggest.
Yeah.
The biggest win.
My big thing is yes, I want, all of my kids to, go to the school that they want to go to or get the money that they deserve. But ultimately it is putting yourself in a position to do what makes the most sense for you. And for those kids, it was avoiding the debt, doing a 18-month apprenticeship program, eventually making $90,000 as a 20-year-old kid with no debt.
It's incredible. I mean, it's even $90,000 with no debt. I mean, if you want to go live by yourself, I mean, it's
stupid money for a kid.
Yeah, I mean but if you think about in Pittsburgh, 90,000. Here's my nerd. that's probably, $4,800 a month. And, let's say rent's $1,500, $2,000. But it's totally doable, but it's not you're not living a lavish
Right.
lifestyle yet. You take a school loan payment and it's $1,000 or $2,000 a month. I mean, you're right back into college after you graduate. You gotta have roommates. Maybe you're going back to live with your parents to get that school loan debt paid off. So the decisions obviously you make before college will drastically affect really the rest of your life in some capacity.
Very much so. I was working with a client last night actually, and we were going through the financing portion of what we help them with, and they are contributing to a large portion of their child's tuition and fees, but we still had a balance of about $14,000, and these rates, obviously people are pretty aware these rates are high, and these banks and lenders, they make it so easy for a student to get a school loan, cosign or whatever, but you're at a 7 to 18% interest rate. And for the people who are not aware and you're just worried about paying the tuition bill in August, like you'll sign almost anything and at a 12%, you're going to get killed.
Yeah, it's every 6 years that balance is doubling.
Yeah,
so
it's awful.
Out of the 550, put you on the spot here, kids that you've helped graduate high school into a college acceptance, do you have any figures on what their school loans balances are? And the reason I ask is you blew my mind. The first time we talked a couple of years ago, you're like, how many scholarships that are out there that you go after that I just had no idea about?
There's a lot. If you put the time and you dedicate the diligence to it, there's money out there. It's not as easy as it once was. I remember back in our day, if you have red hair or if you're left-handed, there's money out there. I think those pots have dried up a little bit. They are now way more targeted to, this one's for a student going into nursing. This one is for a female going into the engineering field. So there's still money out there. It's just you have to take the time to identify which ones you're eligible for and then put the time in to write the essays and actually grind it out.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So we've covered education is key, personality set, getting into the right field. Do you have stats? I can look it up as well. How many times someone changes their major?
I do.
Throughout their college.
I do.
How many is that?
I can't quote exactly where it came from, but it was a credible source, I promise. I believe it was 80% of college undergraduates changed their major.
At least once.
At least once. And out of those 80%, I believe the average amount was 3 to 5 times.
Wow.
A lot. Way more than I ever expected.
There's more decision with social media. We want stuff like the boom, 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 boom. It's like decision fatigue's it's like an epidemic right now. It's crazy. We didn't have that back. I mean, I don't even think I have a cell phone in college. Maybe a flip phone.
Let's see. I got my first. No, it wasn't even a flip phone. Remember the old Nokias with the little block?
Yeah.
That was junior year. I remember getting that.
There was no TikTok on there, was there?
No, not. These kids are ruined.
It's crazy. But I mean, there's good that comes out of it. But I think with anything, you have to navigate, when things are, a lot of strengths can become our biggest weaknesses, right? And so now we have so many options. Options are good, but if they overwhelm you to the point where you're changing your major 3 or 4 times, you don't know what school, obviously that can set you back. For some people, probably a lifetime, wondering what their calling is or what their purpose is, et cetera. So your process obviously proactively tries to address that as much as possible. So do you have any more tips? And once you're done with the tips, I want to talk about what are the biggest mistakes that people can avoid, parents or kids, during this process?
Tip number 1, research, vet, have those difficult conversations. Tip number 2, everything happens so much sooner. So again, Matt and I spoke about, handling all this college stuff, early senior year, end of senior year. By the time senior year comes for most of these kids, truthfully, the damage is done, good, bad, or ugly. Now, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, so I'm not saying, the way we do it is the way to do it, but be proactive. So for all of our rising seniors, we have 87 rising seniors. By September 15th, applications built, essays written, applications submitted to first and foremost meet any of these early action deadlines. Maintain the application portal, so ensure student academic reports are submitted or built, letters of rec, transcripts, honors college applications, but then for the kids to be able to actually enjoy 12th grade. They're busier than ever now, so to expect a kid to go to school for 8 hours, go to practice or work or club, music, band, whatever, you get home at 7 o'clock at night and then you have to go write your college essay. It's a big ask.
For sure.
So really try to be proactive to get ahead of the game, but then also try to enjoy the process. And, so many families talk about, senior year, it is the most stressful time because they're badgering their kids to get things done and kids don't want to listen to them. Get it all done now over the summer when you have the time to do it. And then you can actually enjoy the last 9 months with your kid.
It's great. So, do you find that, is there a huge difference between, because you start working with some people as a freshman in high school, right?
I do.
Do you find a major difference between someone starting in your program in 9th grade versus someone waiting till that senior year?
I do. And it's the research and the vetting that happens in between there. So for a senior, yeah, we will help a senior. But again, there's only so many hours in the day and there's only so much time to be able to identify, what are the right fits. It is at that point, okay, what do we want to do? What are the schools that offer what we want to do? And then looking at atmosphere, price point. But as a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, we are, within those 2.5, 3 years, we are confirming you want to go into medicine. Okay, which type of medicine? You might want to start as a doctor, but then realize I'd actually rather go the physician assistant route because I don't want to sacrifice 11 years of training and education. So I would say more so the confirmation of what they want to do and where they want to go happens.
Awesome. John, this is awesome. So I'm just trying to think, because you have, what a lot of people have is like very caring parents that would do anything for their kids. And the kids have all their friends at school. The problem is with that is you kind of become the average of people you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. And, obviously people you love tend to be extremely biased. What you have is unbiased, just facts, like logical information. Yes. So I just want to rapid fire some questions at you, if that's okay. And just, I don't need exact answers. Just give me like estimates. So, let me think. First question. So someone has first of all, SAT scores, when I was graduating, there was like 3 things, but they ignored part of it. So what's the SAT level right now?
SAT,
what's the highest score you can get?
1,600.
And is that 3 parts now or still 2?
2 parts. So this is the one thing that's a big change even from last year. So the SAT is now totally digital. 2 sections. It's broken up into 4 modules, but there's 2 sections. There's a reading comprehension, a vocabulary, and then a grammar piece. And then the second half of it is math.
Okay.
So it went from a 3.5-hour exam. Now it's down to like 2 hours and 10 minutes. So it's still scored the same, but it's vastly different from how it used to be.
Okay. So I'm a freshman and you're sitting down with me. I'm the parent. I want my daughter. I'm like, I'm set. I want an Ivy League. Let's go. Super. You can feel I'm like a crazy parent. Okay. You're telling me what? Your kid needs to have what SAT, what kind of outside activity? Like, what are 3 or 4 check marks I need to have?
For an IB? Okay. So you need to max out the rigor at your high school. Every honors, every AP course offered from now until you graduate. You need, if you're submitting test scores, and Ivy Leagues have reported that they are now going to be requiring scores. So to be competitive, 1520 to 1570.
So basically you're saying I need to be
perfect.
Not me. I need to be my brother.
You need to be perfect.
Who I think he got it like almost a perfect on the SAT. It's crazy.
But in addition to that,
he took all the smart genes away because he's a little bit older than me.
But you're probably taller than him, so it's
a tiny bit. Yeah. But all right, cool. So do outside activities come into play at all? Like how involved I was with sports, how involved I was with, or is it for an Ivy League? Is it just like purely academics?
It is not, sadly. And I went to a seminar.
It is not
It
taken
is-
into effect, or it's not taken into consideration?
It
or-
is very much taken into consideration.
Oh, gotcha.
So
But I only need to be perfect. I need to like
you need
do everything basically.
and everything rolls downhill. So a student who, had a 4.5 GPA and had a 1400, 1450 10 years ago was very much at an Ivy League level, I think. Now these kids, it's an international pool. So they are not only getting the best kids in the US, they're getting the best kids in the world. So the most outstanding grades you can get, test scores almost perfect. The days of being in Key Club and being on the basketball team or being in the marching band, they're a dime a dozen. These kids are spending their summers volunteering at the UPMC Cancer Center, doing cancer research, or they are doing research to be a part of the publication.
So they're not only
This
perfectly
research.
smart, they're perfect human beings, is what you're saying.
It is on a whole nother level.
Gotcha.
These kids, and the parents need to know this, these kids that have the dreams of Ivy League, MIT, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, you were living a life dedicated to appeasing that school, which may or may not happen.
Gotcha. But your second backup choice will be a good.
It
It'll
should
be a Case Western or a Brown or something like
Well,
that.
and the thing now is, like I said, everything kind of rolls downhill. So, the kid 10 years ago who had the stats to get an Ivy, they didn't have the activities. So those kids that have the 4.2s in the 1480s, not the 1520s, they're going down to the next tier, which is the Villanovas and the CMUs. And then they're pushing those kids down to where the U Michigans would be and the Wisconsins. And these schools that you wouldn't expect to be insanely competitive
Are now almost top tiers. Like,
incredibly difficult to get into.
okay, so I'm coming. So, all right, I give up. I'm not. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully, my daughter's smart enough to be Ivy League. Who knows? But I just want her to enjoy life. But anyway, and be productive citizen.
That's
obviously.
what's most important.
Most important, first and foremost, and to add value to others. But so I am. These are just rapid fire questions. I just want to hear your gut responses.
Okay.
And you can correct yours. So I'm middle of the road SAT schools, like a score, what is that, a 12, 1300?
12 is
Okay. So
12 is, average now,
all right.
sadly.
I'm coming in 1200. I generally know I don't want to be a doctor, but I have no idea really what I want to do. And I'm asking you, geographically, I'll go anywhere in America. And I don't have much financial help from my parents.
Okay.
And you have to give me just 3 basic recommendations on, hey, this school will cover, it's got a good business school, you could be X, Y, or Z. Just, they've got the basic cover. What are the 3 best balanced choices from like a finance, economic perspective? They're also safe. We're going to have a good culture there. What would be like your 3 recommendations?
Okay, so something within science, 1200 SAT, what's the GPA?
We'll say like a 3. What's an average? Like a 3.7?
3.7. All right, anywhere in the country, that one's tough. You got to give me a region.
Okay, East Coast.
East Coast. Ohio University is big, but not too big. Very cute, prototypical college town, gorgeous. Out of state for us, but with those statistics, we should be on the higher end of their scholarship tier. 36 for starters, probably turns into 25, 26
After
merit-based scholarships.
going after some stuff, yeah.
So I think that is a great value.
And what could I go study? Okay, is good business school? Good.
Business is solid. They have actually a pretty cool aviation program.
Okay.
General sciences are all fine, unless you get into something niche. And one of my big questions when you're starting is, you want to rule in or out engineering, nursing, architecture, because those are the 3 programs
You have to go to the right
that
place.
typically are not offered everywhere.
Okay. How important is it if you're in one of those 3 to have a top program for as far as getting a good offer job-wise after?
I think that's the $1 million question. Everybody's going to have a different perspective. In my opinion, and I could be wrong, I think a nurse is a nurse. I think an engineer is an engineer, and I think an architect is an architect. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, because me personally, I think like, no, if I love my college, it was great, blah, blah. But I mean, I probably apply less than 5% of what I learn there on a daily basis.
I think, I personally, I think it is what the kid does with the opportunities presented. The name of your school, yes, will it give you network and connections? The name of your school might even get you an interview, but at the end of the day, I think the person gets the job.
Yeah, it's you.
The experience.
You can build your own network. You can work your way into anything. You can work your way out of anything.
That's kind of my approach to it, at least.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm in financial ruin.
Okay.
I'm the parent.
Okay.
My kids were middle of the road. No idea what we want to do. What are you recommending? Are we doing 2 years of community college, then going to 2 years after? Are we still going to Ohio? Like, what would be a good pathway there?
I think it depends on what type of experience the kid is willing to have. And so much of that, now, granted, again, the community college route is incredibly underused. And if you are committed to being financially responsible with this college thing, for a student who doesn't know what they want to do, they are not big on the Penn State party, they're not big on the sorority life, all of the perks that come with a 4-year college. If that's not important to them, community college is 1,000% the way to go.
If I were to go do it again, and I wouldn't change a thing, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying from all the perspective, here's what I would do. I would do 2 years. And this, again, if I didn't play basketball, I couldn't have done this because of basketball, but I would have done 2 years of community college and done as many internships as humanly possible during those 2 years, and just taking it seriously enough to get good grades to carry over. But everything I've ever learned is on-job experience, because like I was told I should be an accountant, and then like my least favorite classes in college, pretty much the only not A I got in college was auditing. I hated it.
And we let you manage our money.
The auditing is like just boring, like corporate stuff. But literally, I went and took a job in auditing. I was miserable for a year. So I would have never done that if I had simply like taken my time and intern. But all these voices were around me like, oh, Deloitte is like, that's the best job offer ever. And Deloitte's a great company, but it just wasn't for me.
It wasn't for you.
It wasn't for me. It wasn't my personality. It wasn't. And so all of those pain points and like years of wasted could have been fixed if I had just gone and like experienced one day, one day, or even 1 hour, even 1 minute of auditing in a room. I would have known. I never would have done that.
Yeah.
But let alone I accepted a job. I'm just going on a rant right now. But it's the reality. I think a lot of kids do that.
Well, and to your point, going back to how many kids change their major, they're told, oh, you're good with numbers, so go be an accountant. And, I think the reason that the major change rate is so high is because, they're told, or the assumption is I should go do this thing. First semester, you're taking your basic business courses. Second semester, you're in your first accounting course. You realize, oh no, this is not anything what I thought it was. I'm going to switch. They have to switch into something, so then they have to switch again. And once you get to a point where, if you change your major early on, first, second, third semester, as long as you're not too deep into the curriculum, it's salvageable. But for the students that are switching junior year, then you're tacking on another semester, another year. And that's when it becomes an issue.
No question.
Versus
costly
being
issue.
able to explore it, go do a job shadow, see it firsthand, and then kind of what you're expected to get into.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, it's a really expensive, if someone just going to, picking on Penn State, and it's a great school, great parties, great football,
awesome.
great, that's an expensive party. If you have no scholarships, I mean, go to community college and give your kid $10,000 so they can go there every weekend.
Yeah.
Buy them an Airbnb for like 8 months, and they can spend every weekend there if they get a 4.0. I'm just thinking out loud here, but anyways, no, I think college is obviously like a once in a lifetime experience, and not taking away from that. I'm just speaking purely from a financial perspective. I think a lot of people, it's not they go more for the name. And then I see a lot of people come out of those 4 years, and that's kind of like the expectation. I love psychology. And then from there, it's like, dopamine hits the certain part of your brain, and then like we can't be happy unless we're getting that. Well, that's impossible. Now you're in the real world, and now it's a
letdown.
There's a lot of again, I think it's an epidemic because there's not enough proactive advice given to kids going to that next level, and this. So I'm going to speak purely statistically, and this is probably going to upset people because everyone wants the best for their kids. But I mean, studies have shown like you help your kids too much, it ends up hurting them. It hurts their motivation. It hurts their success later in life. So this is the first time in history that a couple of things have happened. So first time in history that people in their. So if we look at our parents when they were 20s and now this generation in their 20s, it's the first time in history that people in their 20s now are less successful than their parents. Every time before, kids have been more financially successful than their parents. This is the first time in history that's not the case. Well, you have to ask, why is that? Well, it's simple. I mean, people are riddled with school loans, absolutely riddled with school loans. And there's so much decision fatigue and people are changing their minds every day that they can't stay focused in a career. Our parents, it was pretty. They didn't change their career paths much.
They grinded it out. Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't want to dive too deep in the Gen Zs, but the entitlement that a lot of them feel, the feeling of I need to be fulfilled and I need to make an impact, and the days of being with a company for 10, 20 years. I don't think it happens anymore.
Yeah, and so the other statistic I'm going to share is this is the first time in history in America this year, 2024, that there's more people over the age of 65 in America than there are under 15. And so what that tells you a couple things. One, obviously people aren't having kids, but if you look at where the money flows, over 80% of wealth in America is with individuals over 65 because they've had the most time to accumulate it. So there's actually a lot of people, as the generations pass on, there's going to be a wealth transfer. But right now what's actually happening is there's a wealth transfer from people in their 20s to people in their 60s because of just being riddled with school loans and not making good financial choices, and you're investing in maybe products that you don't need, and the older people own the stocks of those products, so those driving the price. Yeah. So it's just interesting statistics. But I think the education, the literacy, and the decisions. Unfortunately, we go through cycles where, like, I think if one generation had it really hard, their whole life is to make it easy for their kids, and then those kids have it so easy that it ends up creating a really hard life for their kids because they don't do any planning. Yeah. And so it kind of goes in these generations. But I think education, literacy, and tough can fix so we can have a smoother and avoid those huge ups and huge downs. In society.
It makes sense. I mean, it's numbers. It's math. You're the numbers guy.
Way too big of a nerd. Anyway, so I'm trying to think of other wisdom I can extract from you, John. This has been super amazing so far. So what business schools? Let's say in that like top third quartile. So I've got an SAT of like 1,300, GPA of let's say 3.9. A couple, I played one sport. Volunteered a couple times. I'm very sure I want to go into business school.
Okay. How important?
Top 3 East Coast.
How important are the finances?
It's on the scale, but it's not the only scale. I want to have fun. Half of it's planned for my parents. I want to make a good choice, but I also do want to enjoy have that 4-year experience at college. I'm not doing community school. That's off the table. That 4-year. Going to football games, I'm playing in intramurals. I want to have a good experience. I also want to come out with a very good chance of a good job offers right away.
University of South Carolina, Moore School of Business, fantastic. Up and coming, so it's not insanely difficult to get into, but it's getting there. Miami University of Ohio, a sleeper, big D1 school, cute, adorable. Their Farmer School of Business is probably ranked within the top 10 of public schools in the country. This might be a stretch, but University of Tennessee.
Okay.
They are another one that's coming up strong.
Interesting. Knoxville.
Awesome. It's amazing how, and you can...
It's a cool town. It's a cool city.
It's a cool city. Everything within this college stuff works within a trend. So you can see...
Is it kind of like housing markets? It can get real hot and then it
Yes.
can cool down.
Yes.
Interesting.
Pay attention to college football. Who's in the top 10? Who's in the top 25?
Does that help academics or hurt?
It helps interest.
Which drives competition, which
drives
probably
competition.
drives salaries of professors up, which drives money inflow,
All of the
which
things.
drives interest.
So Tennessee, the past couple of years, they've really made a splash with college football, college basketball, college football. And is it a coincidence that over the last 4 years, they've jumped from 40,000 applications a year to 80,000? Which, when you have that spike in applications, you can afford to be more selective, which means you can afford to be less generous with scholarship money because more people want to go there.
I'm going to simplify this for my daughter. We're going, if this school didn't make the NCAA tournament, it's off the table.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
But
I mean,
for
honestly,
some, it's a deal breaker, honestly.
Football is probably more of a trend, but I'm just thinking basketball. That's funny. But I 100%, I mean, there's obviously we know billions of dollars and NIL is showing that just how much money there is, but that makes complete sense as far as, where the money flows is a big driver.
It's so much more of a business than what people realize.
Okay. Just overall, it doesn't matter major, just in what you've seen, top 3 overrated schools, given that, let's say the principles of like the finances, the education you're going to receive, and then job offers after. So not just weighting all those considerations. It doesn't have to be like an equal scale. And then top 3 underrated schools in America.
Overrated. Again, these are just opinions. I think University of Maryland is overrated. I think it's a good school.
What is it, the Terrapins?
The Terrapins. Good school. Overly priced, probably 55, 60,000. Very, very limited with scholarship money. Big Ten school. So, what I tell all my kids is if you want to go to Maryland, go to Penn State. Similar feel, closer. You'll spend half the money. I don't think that's worth it. Overrated from the elements that probably are most important, Alabama. So a lot of people are chasing the Alabama train for obvious reasons. But if you're a very high-flying student, you can get a lot of scholarship money. It's not a difficult school to get into, so it predominantly attracts kids who are on the lower end academically, but they're going to pay $55,000 a year. And the third overrated school.
We're not talking sports here. We're talking
sports. We're
talking academics.
Talking academics. University of Miami.
Interesting.
University of Miami. Yes, it's a great school. I wouldn't go there for anything other than something within science, healthcare. I think that's their bread and butter. But when you're at a $95,000 price point with very little money per year,
get out of here
on everything holy. 95 and
climbing. So good school. We're talking, and again, just to clarify, we're talking bang for your buck.
Bang for your buck, reputation. Yeah.
If money is irrelevant to you, you're going to get a good education there. But if we're talking about the average,
correct.
Yeah. With all these factors at play.
I don't think anything warrants $95,000 a year. Now, these are numbers for parents and families who are not going to qualify for any true need financial aid.
Gotcha. Okay. Top 3 underrated. Given the factors of bang for your buck, acceptance rates,
underrated,
job-wise after.
Florida State.
Okay.
Now, it's on every ranking. It's on every reputation, but not as many people realize how good of a school it is. Insanely hard to get into, and it is constantly ranked on the list for the best value universities. So just to paint a picture,
they got snubbed, undefeated team.
Yeah, well,
that's quarterback goes down. All right, I need to stop talking about sports. Anyways, go ahead.
Average student who gets in 4.4 to 4.6 GPA, 1350 SAT score. They are a public school out of state, but they will cost about $29,000 a year.
That's it. So you're surrounding yourself with geniuses for pennies.
Pennies,
comparatively speaking.
Correct. So underrated from I would say, an awareness standpoint. Not as many
Okay.
people realize how good that is one of the best bang for your bucks.
Okay.
Another underrated, Pitt, which is ironic. So a lot of the kids now,
Yeah,
Pitt,
because you said how expensive it is, but it's that good.
It is expensive, but for where we live in Pittsburgh, so it's in our backyard. So people underestimate how good of a school it is academically. So it is on every top public school in the country, East Coast ranking scale. Now I think it's too much for what it is, but a lot of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt is incredibly underrated. Strong science, strong engineering, business, and Indiana University in Bloomington, underrated. Great school.
Man, that's where my parents went.
Another Kelly School of Business business is their bread and butter, but again, there's some money at stake, but it's a great school, underrated, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. Money is absolutely no issue, and your kid wants to go to Pittsburgh. Again, money. Let's just say it's free, and you can get anywhere you want in Pittsburgh. Business. Where are you sending your kid?
In Pittsburgh, a school in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. Business school.
Pitt.
Over CMU.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think now.
What majors would you pick of CMU over?
Anything STEM.
Okay.
Engineering, robotics, computer science, anything there, I think is a no-brainer.
CMU. Okay.
CMU.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not saying that, is Pitt better than CMU? No, but I just feel like there's something about the connections you can get at Pitt with the network.
Interesting. Okay. Well, John, anything I didn't ask today that I should have asked that you think is important for the audience to hear? Again, my goal is to just extract all the info I can out of you. The
one thing I would add is, and we've touched on it, find what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your family, your dynamic. The one thing that I think I've seen way too often that can put a lot of these kids in a bad situation is when their parents are vicariously living through them. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of families that, and most of them are well off, truly, because the business that I own, it's for profit, so it is parent paid, and most of them have the means to, support their kids financially,
partially or fully,
yeah, at least to pay for me to be able to give them the support. And there's a spectrum, people who have a ton of money, people who do not, and the parents who would have loved to have that Alabama experience are the ones pushing their kids to go to Alabama and being okay with them taking out $200,000 in student loans. And I think that is the most devastating part versus a parent that, doesn't care about, their kid having the experience of a lifetime for 4 years because they understand the impact that all this has. So, if I can give any advice, don't live vicariously through your kids. Don't allow them to chase the 4-year Miami dream unless you are okay with spending $500,000 a year or $500,000 for a 4-year degree, and really have those hard conversations.
Great advice. Great advice. We try to have those as well as proactively as possible, but it's, as you know, having kids hit differently. You just want to do anything you possibly can for them. But
I get it.
It's great until, again, that strength, you got to make sure it's a strength and it doesn't turn into a weakness.
Right.
So, well, John, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure this is going to be incredible wisdom for all of our listeners.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to see you.
Thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. Hopefully you found this helpful. Really hope this is as beneficial and impactful to as many people across the nation as possible. So hit the follow button. Make sure to rate the podcast, and please share with any friends or family members that would also find this beneficial. Thank you very much.